I guess my new role on YouTube is explaining creepy cradle-robbing relationships in superhero media. You've seen me defend Bruce Wayne and Barbara Gordon. Now get ready for Professor Xavier and Jean Grey, a relationship that's never actually existed to my knowledge in or out of the comics, unless you count the voice actors who portrayed Jean and Xavier in X-Men the Animated Series. They had a kid together. Way back in X-Men issue 3, cover dated January 1964, we get this panel of Professor Xavier silently contemplating his love for Jean Grey. I think because the professor is bald, and we as a society associate baldness with old age, and the fact that Patrick Stewart was in his early 60s when he first played Xavier, never mind the fact that Stewart was basically bald almost 15 years prior to his first time as Xavier, these factors tend to make us think of Xavier as quite a bit older than the rest of the X-Men. But is he really? Let's break it down. In X-Men issue 1, cover dated September 1963, Xavier tells his students he was born of parents who worked on the first atomic bomb project. The Manhattan Project first began in 1942, so if Xavier's parents knocked boots 10 seconds after the Manhattan Project began, he'd barely be 21 years old in 1963. But when we get to X-Men issue 12, cover dated July 1965, we find out Xavier's father died in an atomic blast at Alamogordo, New Mexico. While the issue itself is vague on when this explosion took place, Google tells me the only nuclear explosion at Alamogordo was the Trinity test in 1945, which effectively ended the Manhattan Project. X-Men 12 doesn't tell us how old Xavier was supposed to be when his father died, but he's definitely older than 3 years old, despite this very issue telling us Xavier no doubt got his powers from his parents being exposed to radiation before his birth. But, I mean, you tell me, does this kid look 3 years old? While I'm not aware of any Silver Age issues that give Xavier's age, we do have some later issues that can help us. The second X-Men series, issue 12, cover dated September 1992, Xavier tells Wolverine he was only 9 when his father died. And in X-Men Legacy, issue 211, cover dated July 2008, Xavier is having a conversation with a hallucinatory Cassandra Nova who says he was 7 when his father died. Since this is just a few issues after Xavier was shot in the head and he doesn't even recognize Gambit in the very next issue, I think we can safely say his memories are a little fuzzy here. So let's assume he was 9 when his father died at Alamogordo. This means Xavier was born in 1936, making him 27 when X-Men issue 1 came out. This doesn't quite add up with other events in Xavier's life, as we're told in X-Men issue 12, cover dated July 1965, that he and his stepbrother fought in the Korean War, which went from 1950 to 1953. He would have been 14 when the war started, so maybe he could have lied about his age and got in toward the very end of the war, but that's a stretch. Maybe Stan Lee meant for Xavier to be older when his father died, or maybe he just wasn't that good at math and didn't think the target audience for these comics would be looking too hard at the dates to figure out how old Xavier was when he joined the Korean War. Figuring out the ages of the original X-Men is a little more difficult. The original team all air quotes graduate in issue 7, cover dated September 1964, though they all continue to live at the mansion for a dozen more issues, still doing the same stuff they did before, so I'm not sure what good it did them to graduate. But typically, a teen in the United States is 17 or 18 when they graduate high school, and Jean Grey kind of leaves the X-Men to go to college in issue 24. We know Iceman was 16 in issue 1, and they kind of make a big deal about that, like the other guys are older than Iceman. In a series of short flashback stories starting in issue 38, Cyclops runs away from an orphanage right before Xavier recruits him, so he had to be younger than 18. So while I don't have any hard evidence of Jean's age when she joins the X-Men, I'm going to say around 17, a decade younger than Xavier. Hey, this looks familiar. Am I okay with this? Nah, I don't have to have Xavier and Jean being a thing, and unlike Batman and Batgirl, who were occasional partners who grew closer over the years, Xavier was Jean's teacher, so any attempt at a relationship would be an abuse of power. Like I said, there's never been a relationship as far as I know, but while I was able to kind of hand-wave the Batman-Batgirl thing, this looks a little more disgusting, even though the age gap is about the same. While I do not like this idea, I'd like to discuss some other questionable relationships of the 20th century. Charlie Chaplin was 29 when he married his first wife, Mildred Harris, only 17 at the time. 24-year-old Elvis Presley first met Priscilla Ballou when she was 14. Janet Leigh first got married at age 15. I hate to say it, but even in the early 60s, I think the attitude was, well, this is just how it is. Stan Lee probably thought, it's not that creepy for Xavier to be crushing on a student 10 years younger than him. In fact, in X-Men issue 3, the thing that seems to be keeping Xavier from making a move isn't his seniority, but the fact that he's in a wheelchair. So I guess my thesis statement here is, it could be worse. Most people see this and think 60-year-old man crushing on a teenager. This is bad. I'm not in any way defending it, but it's not that bad. And fortunately for us, this was only brought up once more after this issue. So other than some jerk with a YouTube channel getting into this, it's not really something we have to worry about if we like the X-Men. Maybe you feel differently than I do about this, and if you do, throw a comment down below. Until next time, have a good one.